97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
It's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Here we go. Football at 4. A lot to get into today. Jim Schwartz and Dave Fipp both speaking to the media, and a lot coming from the Jim Schwartz stuff and interesting stuff to get into regarding Carson Wentz and this defense and everything as they get ready to turn the page to the Cincinnati Bengals, who will be at Lincoln Financial Field for just the third time all time in the series. The first time the Bengals have been here since 2012. It's the 14th overall meeting between the two teams. I think the last time they played, or one of the more recent times they played, they tied. I mean, they've had some weird games with the Bengals in the past. Zach Taylor, the head coach, second-year man, he is a disciple of one Sean McVay. So can we see Taylor calling McVay to say, hey, what kind of offensive plays worked on Sunday against that team? Because I'm going to do a lot of the same things. What do you think about that possibility, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. I think the Rams set the blueprint for how to beat the Eagles, how to attack them and find success. And I think it's for them to do their due diligence. They're going to do that and look to find any angle to kind of get their first win.
Yeah, I know a lot of Zach Taylor's principles. He's got Joe Burrow, another quarterback who likes to, be mobile, get out of the pocket, similar to what they did with Goff. A lot of misdirection here. So when you look at what the Rams were able to do you think that the Bengals have that kind of personnel where they can follow the blueprint?
I do. I like their personnel almost better, except maybe tight end, because tight end Drew Sample, he's a young player. He's taken over for C.J. Uzomah, who, of course, is finished for the year due to injury. They have A.J. Green, who's really a shell of his former self, but he's a possession receiver at this point of his career. He can go up and get the football. He's probably going to be matched up against Avonte Maddox. There's going to be opportunities there for A.J. Green to win those matchups. Avonte struggled last week mightily with some bigger receivers and quicker guys. Tyler Boyd, to me, is the X factor in that receiving core. He can play in the slot, or you can play him up outside. He's very quick. He has sure hands. He's shifty. He can make a lot of things happen. He's a little bit more athletic. I would say he's probably comparable to Steven Sims, who the Eagles surrendered to in Week 1. Tyler Boyd, to me, is going to be the X factor. And then, of course, you have John Ross, who really hasn't lived up to his first-round billing, but he can certainly take the top off of a defense when he's healthy. Yeah. And T. Higgins as well. T. Higgins is a rookie. He's a second-round pick. He's a guy that you can see him play some X receiver on Sunday. He has some separation ability and terrific body control. So they're going to have their hands full. They have 4 receivers, really, that have all these different dimensions.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned those guys, and you take a look at what Jim Schwartz today said. He said, I had a poor game plan. We had a very simple game plan, and he says, that the Rams use tempos out of their huddle, a lot of different motions. So was Jim Schwartz pointing the finger at himself? Is he basically taking the bullet for his team? Did you not like his game plan, or did his team just is there a big problem? Did they expose some big-time warts?
Well, the funny thing is that he pretty much said that he wasn't happy with his game plan. It wasn't good enough. But his game plan to me seemed like pretty much every other game plan that he's had, as far as lack of aggression, very tentative defense. They're never on. Doesn't seem like they're ever on the attack. It just seemed to me like that's what he's working with. That's pretty much what he's going to do. He's not since he's been in Philadelphia, he hasn't been very innovative in his defensive calls. He hasn't really sent a lot. He's not a big advocate of blitzing. And I really do think that he's very limited in what he could do due to his personnel. And that's really, like we talked about yesterday, that's not really going to change at this stage of the season.
So if he stays with the same game plan and they go into Sunday saying, hey, we're going to do the same thing, just hoping they execute better, do you think if they do execute better that this style can win against the Bengals?
I certainly think that if they execute properly, they can win against a team like the Bengals, but they're going to run into a problem when they get into their buzzsaw of the schedule. When you're going against more formidable teams that have an accomplished quarterback, that have a lot of different offensive weapons. I mean, the defense that he's running is only going to get them so far. It's not really the modern defense that you really see the NFL team, that successful NFL teams are really implementing on their team, implementing to their teams. It's kind of a very, antiquated defense that doesn't really rely it really relies on your front four to get home and affect the quarterback. Otherwise, they pretty much have all day to sit back there and pick apart that secondary, which definitely is flawed outside of Darius Slay.
Okay, you just said something, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, right here on the Sports Bash. You just said something that you're absolutely right about, the fact that they need the pressure from their front four. They're not getting it right now. But do you, look around this roster and – I've said this the last couple of years, people want them to blitz. They're not a good blitzing team. They don't have good blitzers. There's a skill in blitzing. Would you agree with that, and that they don't have the personnel? They don't have that elite blitzer.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, obviously Malcolm Jenkins would have thrived in that role if he was here this year. I do think that Will Parks can be efficient in that role when he's healthy. But as of right now, the guys that he has to work with, I agree 100%. They don't really have the necessary personnel that's going to thrive in blitzing. They don't have that guy right now. I think Kayvon Wallace, when he's more up to speed with the playbook, I certainly think that he can do well in that area. But as of right now, I mean, who do you send? Do you send Jalen Mills? Do you send Nathan Gary? Do you send? I mean, their options are very limited, and I think that when you add Will Parks, you may see a little bit more creativity because he can line up so many different places, and that's pretty much what he was brought in to do. But yeah, right now they're very limited as far as what they can do in that area.
Between Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz, the media coverage has been a little interesting over the last couple of weeks. And I know they're not accustomed to, or they're not normally calling out guys, but I thought when Jim Schwartz was saying, Brandon Graham normally does better, then he took a step back and said, I'm not calling out guys, but Brandon Graham is a great player. Do you find it weird with both coaches, really, that it seems the message to the media has changed when it comes to maybe not taking as much? I mean, he did say it was his system, but they are taking a little shots here and there throughout some of the team as well.
Yeah, Brandon Graham, you're talking about when Jim Schwartz said that he let some things go on the backside in the running game. That definitely struck me as a little off because he singled out, I believe it was not only Brandon Graham, but also Jalen Mills and Avonte Maddox. He also singled out. You're not accustomed. You're right. You're not accustomed to seeing any coach, especially under the Doug Peterson era, really throw guys out there and put their errors out there for everyone to kind of hear. Usually they keep that in house, but I think it's a culmination of, you're starting to see a lot of frustration early in the season, and they're really looking for an answer because what you like to see is, yes, he took ownership. He said his scheme wasn't good enough on Sunday to win. That's great. But then he started going after, throwing little shots in there about what guys could have done differently in certain situations, which usually is kept in house. So I thought that was a little off, and I think that might kind of stem from some of the frustration that's building.
What did you take from Schwartz's answer today about his personnel at linebacker?
That was kind of an answer I expected a defensive coordinator to say, to stand behind his linebackers. I didn't expect him to be like, yeah, the guys that they gave me aren't good enough. But he definitely said that.
But if you're reading the tea leaves here, was he kind of saying like, yeah, I didn't put them in a good enough position, yet they all stink. What did you want me to do with them? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, the thing is you could scheme to their you could scheme around their abilities, but their skill set is their skill set. These are limited players with limited ability. They're not meant to be out there for 60 snaps a game. You can always scheme so much with these guys. Pretty much what you see is what you get with them. TJ Edwards has a little bit of upside, but he's more of a rundown linebacker. He's gotten a little bit better in pass coverage, but he is what he is. Nathan Gary is the third or fourth linebacker on a team. You're not really going to get much out of him. There's not much more that Jim Schwartz can really do to kind of make things to kind of do a little window dressing there with the linebackers. I mean, outside of starting your rookie Davion Taylor and Sean Bradley, there's really not too many other options they can go with here.
We can talk about the flawed personnel all we want, but when you look at Jim Schwartz, he has a lot of power in this organization. And, to an extent, wasn't he picking a lot of these guys as well?
Yeah, but to what extent? It's funny because you listen to what special teams coach Dave Phipps said, and he singled out a couple Bengals linebackers that he thought were really impressing him when he looked at the film on special teams coverage, and that was Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson. And he said that those were two players that they were also interested throughout the draft process. Those are guys that are contributing to the Cincinnati Bengals right now, and they have a very high upside. Akeem Davis-Gaither is a more polished version of a Davion Taylor. Very, very athletic, not quite as raw, but, he is also very undersized, and he has that rangy sideline-to-sideline speed. These are guys that were taken after, not Logan Wilson, but Akeem Davis-Gaither were taken after Davion Taylor, and these guys are contributing. So they intimated that they showed a little interest in these guys. So it was really interesting to see them kind of land on, Davion Taylor in the third round. And I don't know how much of that was put directly on Jim Schwartz. I think that was more above him. I think that was more of a Howie Roseman deal. But I mean, there was definitely some other options out there that, they could have been found later that are obviously contributing to their football team.
Real quick, you mentioned Davion Taylor. And look, I'm not going to say the guy's a bust. He hasn't played at all, but when you draft Jalen Hurts in the second round, you take a third-round player, don't you have to say, hey, we need a third-round pick that can help us now? I mean, do you look at – I know you do a lot of draft stuff, Andrew. You pay attention to that a lot. Is Davion Taylor a big enough project where it was worth really saying our second-round pick is a project, and we're also going to take a guy in the third round who's not going to help us this year?
Mike, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I do a lot of extensive film study in the draft. I take a lot of pride in breaking down film, and I had Davion Taylor rated as a fifth-round pick. Take that for whatever it's worth, but there was a lot of things that I saw in his game that led me to believe that he was a day three guy. He's not somebody that's going to be ready to step in year one or year two to play linebacker. If anything, he's going to play special teams. He doesn't have a lot of experience. His game tape wasn't very impressive. You see a fast guy running around the field, but there's not a lot of technique and fundamentals. He still needs to learn these things. So taking him in the third round was a head scratcher for me. If I was in the third round, a player like Alex Highsmith, an edge rusher who's obviously contributing with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, who won a pick before Davion Taylor, I would have maybe been a little bit more aggressive, maybe traded in front a few picks to secure him because they do need a young edge rusher there. There's a lot of ways they could have went, but to pretty much spend two picks, like you said, two premium picks, second and the third round, guys that aren't going to contribute to your football team. I mean, Jalen Hurts may, here or there later in the season, but they needed help in a lot of areas. And those two, to have pretty much two guys that are redshirting their first season, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I like that we're going down this road because it does seem like drafting over the last handful of years is definitely catching up with this squad. For example, the whole J.J. Arcega-Whiteside thing, you look at that and, okay, DK Metcalf is tearing it up with Seattle. You can argue that maybe that wouldn't have even happened here because they don't have Russell Wilson. But regardless, the fact that you missed on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, is that why you draft Jalen Reagor the following year in the first round? If you hit on that wide receiver from the year before, maybe you have a chance to go in another direction and pick somebody else at a different position the year following, and Derek Barnett doesn't look good. At this point, it just seems like the lack of drafting is starting to crush this squad.
You're 100% right. You hit the nail on the head, Hunter. And the thing is, I don't believe that they got what they thought they were getting in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, although it's very puzzling because if you watch his college tape, he wasn't a burner, and the offense desperately needed speed. He was a guy that was dominating these Pac-12 corners, going up top and coming up in the red zone and high-pointing the football and being that possession receiver that was really just, dominating and high-pointing the football. They already had that now, Sean Jeffrey. And then they realized that when they saw their offense last year that, hey, this is probably the slowest offense in the NFL. We need to add some speed guys. So then you had to go correct your mistake by taking Jalen Reagor in the first round, when there was other areas that they could have went to. They could have taken advantage of a deep offensive line class, and they needed an edge rusher. There's a lot of ways that they could have went. I feel like they wasted that pick on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. You know, if you want to look back even further in that draft, in 2019 draft, I thought they should have drafted Juan Thornhill, the safety from Virginia, who Juan actually told me at his pro day that Tim Houck, the Eagles safety coach, went down there to Virginia to work him out. And that would have been a great fit. Now they're going to have a safety issue coming up in the next season or two, along with linebacker and a number of other positions. So it's starting to snowball here.
The linebacker thing is a big problem because it seems like, look, I know that everyone says it's a passing league, but a lot of the passing has become bubble stuff and a lot of stuff in the open field that if you can't tackle in the open field, and look, the Rams ran the ball at you 39 times the other day. We talked about it all week last week is if they're committed to the run, they ran 40 times against the Cowboys, and if they commit to that run, they're going to wear you down because those linebackers simply can't hold up, and that was a big problem. So the fact that they have completely dismissed the linebacking situation is really outrageous.
And I will tell you something else. Joe Mixon, he packs a punch. He's bigger than the two running backs that the Eagles saw on Sunday. He's going to be coming downhill. Granted, the Bengals offensive line doesn't generate a whole lot of push, but you know what? The Eagles defensive line hasn't gotten a whole lot of penetration either over the past week or so. So, I mean, Joe Mixon's the guy that's going to go north and south, but he also has the athleticism and versatility to bounce it outside and really, you know, take it to hit the edge and take it upfield. And Giovanni Bernard's a terrific pass-catching running back as well. And we already mentioned the four receivers that they have. The Eagles cannot go into this game taking this team lightly. Joe Burrow is 0-2. He's not accustomed to losing. If you watched his press conference from last week, he looked upset. He looked angry. He looked like he had a chip on his shoulder. It was something to prove. He's going to come into Lincoln Financial Field really looking to prove something. If the Eagles aren't on their A game or aren't close to their A game, he'll make them pay.
No, you're right. I mean, people forget that team was really bad last year, but keep in mind, they had a injury at the quarterback position, which basically they were playing a quarterback who was not an NFL quarterback. They lost A.J. Green, so they were essentially down their best weapon, and that put them in the spot to get the number one pick. So now, of course, they got Burrow playing quarterback. Huge upgrade that spot. A.J. Green is back, so it gives them a big weapon there. This isn't a pushover Bengals team like they were last year. But let me, ask you about that defensive line. Hargrave, he was a guy that if you watch his film from Pittsburgh, a lot of interior pressure, and maybe he doesn't get the sack, but he allowed others around him to get sacks because so much attention. Malik Jackson, Fletcher Cox, those three guys there, Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, who stinks, by the way, and Josh Sweat and that group of guys, you would think that they should be getting more pressure from this group of guys because of their tackles.
Oh, 100%. It's unacceptable. I mean, you look at the money that's allocated to their top three defensive tackles, there's really no excuse you're not really going to see, you're typically not going to see, I should say, defensive tackles show up in the stat sheet as far as, eight tackles, 2 sacks, et cetera, unless you're Aaron Donald, except for Sunday. But, I mean, these are, like you said, their job is really to take on a lot of these double teams, clog up running lanes, and open things up for guys like Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, and some of these other guys, and Malik Jackson as well. These are things that are going to contribute to poor pass defense. When you can't get home and you let a quarterback sit back there, do whatever he wants, step up in the pocket, get comfortable, and really go through his progressions, and you're not getting any pressure on him. I mean, these are all things that are culminating, and that's why they're sitting in an 0-2 hole right now.
Yep, a lot of great stuff here from Andrew. And then you talked about the fact that the defensive tackles, they're supposed to take up space, not maybe make the tackles. Their linebackers aren't equipped to step in there and make those tackles. That's another problem, and I think you're going to start to see teams, as you mentioned, Mixon's a handful. I think you're going to look at teams taking the Eagles and running right at them for a lot of this season.
And the scary thing is when I watched the tape from Sunday, the linebackers, they are befuddled. They can't find the football. They're just running it with almost like without, chickens without their heads. They're just running around and they don't really flow to the football. And they don't seem to have that innate football intellect that you want to see from your second level defenders. And that's concerning. I mean, Nate Gary has been lauded for being, one of the coach's pets, for being a sharp-minded football player and always knowing his responsibilities and getting guys lined up. But he himself has struggled with the basic fundamentals and on his assignment. So, I mean, when that's the guy that they're really that's fronting your linebacking core, you have some major problems.
He's Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL. Does a great job of covering the league. And, of course, you can read more of his stuff at 97.3 ESPN.com. Take a look at his 5 observations from that Eagles loss and as he gets you ready for this Bengals game. And you mentioned it, this Bengals team is not a pushover here. And, by the way, Dave Phipp also, the special teams coordinator, he spoke today as well. That was about the one area where, the Eagles got that turnover. It set up the one touchdown they got. But the special teams could be a factor here. The Bengals have the Bengals have a pretty good unit.
It's going to be a very big factor. And that's the third phase is something that often gets neglected when you look at the game as a whole. But I'll tell you what, they have a returner in Brandon Wilson, who was 6th in the NFL in kick return yards with 625 last season. He scored a touchdown as well. He's averaging 43.7 yards on 3 returns. Alex Erickson is a very dynamic punt returner. He's very shifty, decisive. If the Eagles, obviously there's no Craig James. Rudy Ford's done a fantastic job in coverage. So has T.J. Edwards. So has Duke Riley. The Eagles have gotten good effort from their third phase, but that right there could be an X factor into a game where you don't really have a lot of margin for error.
All right, Eagles, Bengals this Sunday, 1 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage begins at 10 in the locker room with Billy. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Great job, Andrew.
You got to take care.
All right, and we'll talk to him again next week right here on the Sports Bash. Tomorrow, football at 4, Jeff Mosher. Thursday, Adam Kaplan. Mosher is back on Fridays, and football at 4 is brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250.